Hello everyone, welcome to my first episode of creating a React app. It's actually a series that I prepare for my students in class, which is normally in Dutch, but I will do this in English. I will do it at home with some beers. So I will open a beer. So cheers. What are we going to do today? The first thing we're going to do is actually create our first little React app using the Create React app tool. First, we have to check if we have the npx tool installed. What is npx? Npx is actually a way of installing, well, not really installing, but using tools that are available on npm without installing it first. Let's check if we have it installed properly. We'll use npx version, and then you can see the version of npx. So we're going to use this tool to use the Create React tool. Let's start with you typing npx create react app. Actually, the first thing I want to discuss, what is the advantage of using npx, is actually that you do not have to install the tool yourself. So normally you have to install it with npm install g create react app, but that way you are responsible of always updating it yourself. With npx, you're certain that you're always using the latest version. So let's keep using npx here, but we could have done it with npm install g create react app. Got a wrong beer here. So where are we? So npx create react app. Let's call it the first app. And very important, we're going to use TypeScript here. I don't really like JavaScript that much, so when TypeScript emerged, I was very, very happy that we had some static typing and stuff like that. So I'm a big fan of TypeScript, so let's keep using TypeScript. Template, TypeScript. If you add template, TypeScript, it will create the template in TypeScript. If you do not enter this, you will have JavaScript by default. So let's not do that. Let's stay away from that. So let's start. Now it will create the app. It has a lot of dependencies. I will show you soon how many dependencies there are. You can check it later if we open the project in the node modules file. I'm not sure if you can see the dependency graph, how it's done again. Graph of package.json. I'm just looking it up right now. Let's see. Yes, we will do the npm list command, and then we will see all the dependencies. But let's just wait until the installation is complete. First of all, I must say that this is totally unprepared. So this is the first time I'm doing this. So things might go wrong. I will have to look up stuff. Hopefully in class this will go better. But let's install. It's a long while. It takes a long time because there's a lot of dependencies here. If you compare it to Angular, Angular has even more dependencies. It will take even more time to install. So it's actually worse, but React is also taking a long while. Usually if you have slow internet connection, this will take a long time, and the installation is like huge. It's actually a funny meme that I have here, the npm modules, node modules, wait, I will show it right now. It's actually a very funny thing that I sometimes show in class. It's like here, that node modules is actually the heaviest object in the universe. So you have the sun, the neutron star, black hole, and you can see this is like heavy as hell. So let's close this up and continue with our quest for our first React app. So what did we create? Let's just open it up. We will open it and we called it the first app, which is not a catchy name, but okay. It's the first thing I could come up with. Let's open it up. And you can see the source directory open here, and you can see it's a TypeScript file. There's actually an X at the back here. I will show you why this is an X, but you can see TS, that's for TypeScript, so we used the correct template. Let's just first look at a couple of things here. First of all, you can see a lot of dependencies. This was all installed when I did the create React app command. You can see it's a lot of stuff. So React has a lot of dependencies. Like any JavaScript project, it's always huge. Then first we will look at the package. Here you see there's not a lot of dependencies here, but these dependencies like React and React DOM, they have a lot of other dependencies, and it's like going wild out here. So you have the React DOM, React scripts, it all has its own dependencies, and then you have the enormous tree here. Let's, like I said, let's show the dependency tree here, npm list. It will gather it all, and then you can see a nice graph here for where all these dependencies come from. So you can see it here. It's a lot. It's even bigger than my scrollback buffer. So it's that many dependencies. But let's just ignore this and continue on our little creation of our React app. It also creates a git ignore file, which is quite useful if you want to commit and push this to a remote repository. You can see the node modules is out of there. You do not want to push this to your Git repository because it will take a long time. And like I said, node modules is the heaviest object in the universe. You do not want to push it to GitHub or something. So let's continue. What do we have here? We have the public folder, which is a place where you usually never go or not a lot of time goes. But if you see here, it has HTML here. And this is actually the place where everything will be added to the DOM. You have the div, which is actually the root div, and everything from the React app will be rendered inside this one. But you do not change this. You just leave it here. Normally, it's just if you have to change the favicon, it's like this, but stuff like this you normally never change. Maybe some small things here, but stay away from this file for now. Let's close up the public folder. And let's see if there's something else we have to show. Well, it's actually the first source file is the TSX. And you can see it's like a combination of, it's JavaScript and HTML combined. That's the way I can describe it. You can see some stuff that you normally know, like a div, header, image, and stuff like that. We will remove it soon, whatever is in here. Usually I don't use the function way of writing functions. I just write like this, but I use arrow functions, but you can do it whatever you want, but I will just use the arrow functions because I like them much more. So that's what we did. We created the app function, and actually this is called a function component. And a function component is actually just a function that takes some parameters, which we will use properties for. You will see that later. And you can see here, it returns an HTML. So it's actually a function that returns some view code, which is actually just HTML. We will throw some stuff out, but we will first start it up to show that it actually works. Just do npm start. Make sure you are in the correct directory, which is really okay, because I actually accidentally installed some node modules here. Let's just delete them. Do not delete the ones in the directory here. But for some reason, I accidentally typed npm install in the Git folder, so it installs node modules there, and it goes wrong. Let's just ignore that. Let's go back to the first app. Okay, now we'll do npm start. And now our browser will open up the web application if we did things right. As you can see, there's a spinning thing here. This is the default page. It will point you to the documentation. You can learn everything you want about React. I will try to give you a small summary of everything in this small video series. Let's close this up and let's put it somewhere else. let's first, and what we can do here, we can actually do some live editing here. Hello world, like this. If we go it like this, you can see it automatically updates. If I put my Visual Studio Code like this, you can see, yeah, okay, it's like, so I can actually do some live updates here. It will update every time I change this one. It changes everything on the browser. It's actually also delete everything related to CSS. All this CSS is not necessary. Let's delete it. And then we have a blank template. Another nice thing you can install is using some developer tools, which actually, if we go to manage extensions, we're gonna install wait, let's for some reason, why the React app extension, React developer tools, sorry, it was called like that. I already have it installed. So normally it should be showing up in here. If I use it developer tools, I already have it. So that's why I cannot. So if you just install the React developer tools, you can actually see some nice stuff in here. You can see the components that we're using. Currently, you do not really know what a component is probably, but I will show you in an instant. So let's just ignore this, but these are nice tools. This is like a profiler. You can, well, you can speed up your app by seeing where it goes wrong, if there's too many renders or something. So it's nice to watch in there. And this is actually the component tree, which we will go back into later. So now we started up the app and looked at the developer tools. So let's start making our first component here. So like we made it empty. We put in hello world. So let's put it in nice H1s, like header hello world. And then we have a nice title here. And then you can see some stuff like this is actually just a function. Like I said before, it returns the HTML. It usually has some properties, but this is the first component, so it has no properties. Nothing is entered here. No parameters or arguments are coming in here. So let's just keep this empty. So what we can do is actually, like I said, it's actually a combination between JavaScript and HTML. So we can actually make some variables here. So like title, and we do like world. So I made a little constant here named title. What can I do? I can actually use these curly braces. And what did I just do? In these curly braces, you can use expressions, which will be rendered at the place that you put them in. So this title will be placed here. So if I change this constant, it will become hello world with an exclamation mark because I put it in this constant, which is really nice because this way you can combine with this little expression syntax your views with some variables outside the view. Another thing, you can also do some stuff like using function in this to uppercase. So it capitalizes stuff like that. You can just use any expression. For example, if I put there 1 + 1, it has this expression hello 2. So you can put anything there. You can even call functions from it. So if I created the function get greeting, it's a new function. I use the arrow one. I like the arrow one. It's beautiful. So I put return hello world. And actually I can remove the title here. And we can do get greeting and open it up. So we have hello world. So we can actually remove this because it's no longer necessary. So we have a nice way of calling functions. So any expression goes here. Huh? You can combine everything. I can do the to uppercase here. It's actually very useful. I could have put it in a variable. If I put it like this, greeting. It's also possible to put it like this and use it like this. So this is actually just a nice way of well, showing expressions in the view code. What's the first thing we're gonna do? It's create a list, because currently we're just showing one thing. If you want to show multiple things, then you have to use well, first I'm gonna create an array here. Let's put it in the global namespace. This is just a global variable. This is not the way we're normally gonna do it, but just ignore it for now. I'm gonna call it a string type. I like typing things sometimes. And let's add some games like World of Warcraft, mobile, Minecraft, Valheim, or whatever. Now we just want to go over this list. We want to loop over it, and for every element we want to have a div tag. Let's also, well, let's remove the greeting thing and just make it hard-coded again. Let's call it welcome to the H2O store. It's actually a reference to steam, which is actually, well, the byproduct of heating up the water. You create steam, so H2O is water. So this is actually the gag. It's not really funny, but okay. We put a div here. And actually, what we're going to do now, we're going to use the map function on the array. I'm not sure if you know what a map does. I can look it up. Maybe I can explain it like that. You put map JavaScript. There's actually, yeah, it's explained here. Actually, we have an array here, which has some numbers, 1, 4, 9, 4, 16. And the map function, what does it do? You can pass it a function, and for every element, it will return another one. So it actually maps every element to another one in another array. So this map array will actually be a new array where every number is times 2. So 1 times 2 is 2, 4 times 2 is 8, and etc. So the output will be 2, 8, 18, 32. This is actually something we're going to use because it's not possible. First of all, you would like to think like, oh, maybe I can put a for loop here and start doing stuff. This is actually not the case. This is not the way we're going to do it in React. We're actually going to use the map function everywhere for looping stuff. So this is what we're going to do. This is again the syntax for expressions. So we can actually do games, do map, and then we have the callback function, and we do a game, we give it a type, and actually every time I'm gonna move this away so we can see it entirely. So what are we gonna do? We're gonna map every element to another element. What we're gonna do is take this string and map it to a div. We do div, we close the div, and we just use the expression syntax again with the curly braces. So it actually maps every element from this array to another element, which is a div containing the game. It's giving me a lot of errors. I'm not sure why this is. It's probably because of some. It's actually not showing any errors, which is nice. So let's look at the page again, localhost 3000. And if you can see like this, you have it like every element is shown. But if you open up the Chrome Developer Tools, you can see something going wrong here. It will say each child in a list should have the unique key property. Okay, this is interesting. So every child should have this key property. Let's go back to our code and see like, okay, we have to add a key property. It says it like this, yes. So let's add a game. Why do we do this? We just use game as a unique string, which is maybe not really unique here, but we can use it as a key. It's actually used for performance reasons. Well, why is this very important for React? Actually, React needs to know which element he needs to update. if something changes in React, every component is re-rendered. And you don't want to re-render everything. You just want to re-render the part that has changed. How does it know it in a list? It knows it by the key. It says like, okay, the key was World of Warcraft. So if this is changed, and assume that we're using states right now, that's something we will see later. You will see it. It'll say, oh, this was updated, so I only have to change the one with the key that matches this one. So it just changes that div. Because if you had to change everything every time something changes, it will be very, very slow. But this way, React solves this by just using the key to know which component, which element to update, which is a really nice speed improvement. And if we now open the browser again, you can see the warning before is gone. So what can we also do? We can also use objects here. If you want to use a more sophisticated way, we want to add some extra properties like the release year or the sales. We're going to do it like this. We're going to create an interface. We could have also used a type, but I like interfaces more. Let's use an interface. We will have an ID, which is a number, a name, a string, release year, which is a number, and some sales, which is also a number. So we're gonna create some games, which is no longer a string. So let's use game. And we're gonna create some objects here. The same ones that we created before. Let's create World of Warcraft, which was released in 2004. I'm starting to feel very old because this felt like not a lot of time ago, but it's actually been 17 years. So I have my first game, which has the sales. We put it on 0 for now. We will change it later. So let's add some more games. Valheim, which is also a very nice game. 2021, which is a bit more recent, yes, which is actually still in beta, I think. And Minecraft, which is also a lovely game. Had a great time playing it when I was younger. So we have some games. So now we have to adapt the code here. This is no longer a string. We change it to game. And then we started doing some stuff that improves it. We're going to use the ID now as a key, which makes more sense. And let's add some extra stuff here. Like this. Let's add another div. In that div, we will put the name in it. And this is all just basic stuff, no CSS or styling added whatsoever. We will add that later, but we will keep it clean just for showing stuff. I can now open it up again, and then you can see a more advanced version using objects with interfaces, but it's still very, very basic. But what we're going to do now is actually show what's very important in React is actually the componentization of your application. What is a component? It's actually the building block of every React app. Until now, we've always used the one component here, the app component, but it would be very, very silly to put everything in the app component and put everything there. You do not want to use one function which contains everything, which is really would have been a very bad idea. If you put it in bigger software systems, you could put it in a very small application, but when the application grows, we have to componentize it. We have to split it up. So what we're going to do, we're going to create a new component. Let's see which components we can make. So what components can we make here? You can see a header here, which would be an interesting one. So actually, if you want this header on every page, well, like every page, it would be a really silly thing to put it here, but okay. But if we wanted to put this on every page, we would say this would be an interesting thing to put in a component so we can reuse it. We can put it on every page. Another thing that we can actually make a component of would be the list. The list would be an interesting component to make because maybe we can use it somewhere else. We can put it on a sidebar. Maybe we could put it in the middle. It's actually something we might be able to reuse. Normally in React, we just want to split everything up as much as possible so we can reuse as much as we can. This is actually the best way of looking at things. Just look at your HTML or your design you have in your mind and just start splitting things up. For example, here, the header, we will do this the first component. So let's go back to the code and make a nice little component out of this. This is const and we make it the header component. And we just return this piece of code. We just cut it and we make a component. So now we have the component. If we go back to our view, we took it out, so it's gone here, but we can reuse it again and we just use it like any other HTML tag. You can just do like this. And then it looks like an HTML tag, but it's not, it's a component. And if we go back to our web page, you can see the component is back here and we can actually reuse it multiple times like this. Now we will have 5 headers, which is totally useless, but it's just an example. So now we have the 5 headers. And actually, if we go to our components here, if we have the Chrome Developer Tools, the React tools component, you can actually see that the app contains like 5 headers. You can see every component that we're using here, and you can see some information about it. You can see what properties comes in here. We do not use properties yet because we have not seen it yet, but it's interesting to watch like this. Now the second part is, well, let's split this one up. This is like a list component. We will just create another component and do notice that I'm putting everything in a file here. We will split it up in multiple files because every component should be in a separate directory, a separate file with its own CSS and stuff like that. But currently we're not going to do that. We're just showing things like this to keep it easy. So for now, we're going to put it in the main app file, the app.tsx. Normally you just put it in separate files. But for now, we will just, for easiness, we will just put it here in the list. In the app file. So we'll create a list, which is again an arrow function, and we copy this code. We just cut and paste, return, and again, we can actually put some parentheses around it to make it format better. And I'm gonna do some formatting, format document, so everything is nice and clean again. Now we have the list component. Let's remove these silly headers and we just do it like this. So now we have an app which contains a main div, which contains a header on top and a list on the bottom. Just go back, we refresh, and our application looks like it was before. You can see here the app contains a list, a header, and a list, which is quite nice. You can see it like this. So now we split it up in components. Now we will have to look at some other stuff. Let's go look at some handler functions. The first thing we're gonna use here is create an entirely new component, which is gonna present a form. We're gonna do const, we're gonna make an input view, which is a view which has some inputs, and we're going to return again with parentheses for niceness. we just use a div and we use input type text is ID name. So we just have an input field. Just close it up. And we have a number, which we will say it's the year. So we're gonna mimic these things. So the name, the release year. So also give it a name here. So we can get the correct value from it later. Let's say the minimum is 1900s, because before that there were no video games, I presume. And the max is 2021. And we will create a button which has the ID submit, and the value is add, so we can have a nice button here. So we created this input field and input view, and we will put it at the bottom like this. If we go back to our application, you can see a very ugly form here. But this ugly little form will get improved soon. So we have these three components containing some input fields, a button. You can do this other ways. You can also use the button one, but I just used input type button here. But now we have to do something. We want every time something is entered, we want to handle something because we want to keep the change. So what do we have to do is we have to create, if you know your basic JavaScript and HTML, we can add some onChange handlers here, and we will create a function for it. So we don't handle change, we will get the event, and actually we will print out some stuff here, event target value. But we are using TypeScript here. So at the moment we do not know what the event looks like. We could use any, which would be a very bad idea. We'd just be going back to JavaScript times. We do not want this. So what are we gonna do this? We're just gonna use the onChange here. And we're gonna pass the function in there. So every time this text field changes, so this input field name changes, this handle change will be called. And for now, we're just gonna use the any type, but we do not want this. So we're gonna look at this one. We're gonna click on it. You're gonna see it has a type change event handler. We're gonna copy this type. We're gonna go back to our app, and we're gonna say this handler will have the type change event handler. We're gonna import this, add this. It will add it to our missing import. And if we go back here, you can see actually here, it's you can also see the change event handler, and it will say generics here, the T. We'll have to replace it with HTML input element, because this is an input element. So we will just use HTTP input element. It will also need some quick fixes. Did I? HTTP, HTML, of course, silly me. Now we have the correct type, and we do not have to use the anything. Now you see, it's actually the correct type. It will have a change event type, also with the generics HTML input element. You would just print it out, and actually now we can use auto completion. See the target, the value. You have everything like you want it. Let's also add something for the button. Const handle click. And let's also look at the definition here. On click, we're also gonna pass the handle click here. And we're gonna look at the type. It is a mouse event handler. mouse event handler, which is also on an HTML input element. So we have to import this quick fix. Yeah, you can also do the ctrl dot, which for some reason not working here. No, it does not listen to me. Ah, here we go. Add mouse event handler. We just add it here on the top, which is the types. And you can see now, if we like this, you can see the correct event. The event has the correct type. And we're gonna say like console log. We're gonna say button clicked. So now we have some things to look at. So if we go to our console, it has a lot of warnings here. We're gonna ignore those. And if I type something in here, you can see hello world. Every time this input field changes, it will call the event handler and it will just console log everything into your console. If I press the button, you can see button clicked is called. So now we have the handler functions ready. And now we're gonna go somewhere totally different. Let's look at properties, because there's something, well, there's a big elephant in the room here. As you can see, this array of games is still global. We do not want global variables in our application. This is not a good way. Actually, where we want to put it, it's actually not a good way of doing this, is putting it here. We just want to put it somewhere in our component. Imagine we have to fetch it from an external API or something. We have to get it somewhere else and load it in and then pass it on to the other components. This is actually the way we're going to do this. We're actually going to pass it on from component to component. For now, we're just going to move this inside our app component. This is not particularly the best way to put it, but for now, just for illustration, we will put it here. So currently, the array of games is in the app component. So if we go here, it will say, oh, I'm a list, but I do not have any games. This is because before it was a global variable. Now it's no longer that way. And this component has no access to these games. So we need a way of passing these games. The way we can do this is actually done by properties. So how we do this? We just say games and we pass it like with the expression thing, with the curly braces. We just pass the array of games. It's like adding a new attribute to an HTML element, but it's not really like that, but it's actually using properties. But currently, this function does not accept any properties because it just has no attribute. So there's no properties here. So what we're gonna do, we're gonna pass the games array to the list using properties, but now we have to adapt the list component. And now we have to use it like this, put some props here. And again, it says like, oh, there's no type here. So we have to create an interface or a type. We're going to create an interface. We're going to call it list props. You can call it anything you want, but I like it just the name of the component and then props on the end. And then we're going to say, well, the props are going to be like this. So the props that we enter, these are the arguments of the function. They will adhere to this interface. They will follow the interface, and I will here describe what the props object will contain, which is actually a list of games. It's an array of games. Now currently this contains props, but this is games. We can actually do this, props games, and it would work. But we can also use destructuring. This is actually a nice way of getting the properties out of the object without going like props.games. We can actually do it in here, and we do it like this. And then it actually takes the games property out of the games object. So we can actually use it like this. So nicely, without using the props dot notation, which is also fine, but we like it this way, that you can just reference it like this. And then you can see that the problem here was fixed. So now we're just passing on the games to the component using properties. So this is a way of passing data down from a parent component to a child component. And not a lot of code changes here. It usually happens a lot where components is passed down many components. Sometimes it will go down a very deep structure. This is sometimes considered as a problem, because if you have to pass it down like 10 levels deep, it will become very hard to maintain, and there's a lot of possibilities of changing that and improving that. We will see that later on, but for now we'll just use the properties, which is the best way of passing data from one component to another component. We're gonna run our application. Apparently is there still an error? No, there's not an error. Everything is still working fine. So let's look at state, which is also a very important concept in React. Actually, state and properties are one of the most essential concepts that you have to understand in React. Properties are used to pass down information down the component structure. So you have the parent component, will give it back to the child component, which will give it on to its child's components, etc. And state is something different. It's used to make your application interactively. It's actually used to hold information, and every time this information is changed, your component will re-render. It will draw itself again, using the state, the updated state, to know which part of your component to update. Let's show this by an example. Let's go back to our input view. I will have a drink first. So this is the input view. Remember, we just printed out this. And what if we wanted to put something below here? Sorry, like this. We just wanted to put a paragraph here. We wanted the name you typed is name. Well, at the moment, we do not have a name variable. Like, I would say, very naive of doing this, we would say, okay, the handle change event was called, let's make a variable, let name is a string, let's keep it empty in the beginning, and let's say name is. So we're actually just using a variable here and saying name is equal to the value of this input field, and we will show it here. There's no errors here. React is not complaining about anything, but you're doing something really, really wrong here. You will see it will not work. You're typing something in, it's not updating. This is not how it works. Let's never, ever, ever do this again. This is not the way. React does not know that this variable causes an update here. It doesn't know it. It's not triggered anywhere. That's why we have to use states. States are something that React knows. If it's updated, it knows, okay, this state, which is actually like a sort of a variable that is observed by React. If it's changed, it will re-render the component. Let's see how we're doing it. You have to use a use state hook. this sounds a little bit out there. What is a hook? We don't know yet, but hooks will be explained later. But for now, we will use the use state hook, which is actually a nice way of creating a state. What we're making a constant, which might be something else. You can make a let here too, but we will use a constant. We'll say name, which is the name of the state. And actually, a second parameter is like set name. This is the state itself, so the value of the state. And this is a function that we can call to change the state. How do we get these things? And do mind, it's very important to put these things, every hook you have to put in front. You just say use state, and we will say it contains a string, and the default value, the first value, is empty. And we will use, we'll put it on top here. So now we have a state. This maybe looks a little bit complicated, but this function, this use state, will actually create an array, a tuple of two elements, name and set name. The first is just the state, the thing you can just show, and the set name is the setter. If you do this, if you change the state with set name, React will know that it has to update the entire component, but actually the part that is relevant here. But it knows that this guy, he used set name here, so I have to redraw the component. So we're gonna use set name here instead of just using a variable, which is a very bad idea. This is not gonna work because I made it constant here, just to make sure that no one else will ever change it. So now it knows you cannot change this. Never change this directly, it will not work. Always use a setter. We'll set name. And we will use it like this. And now we're just calling this setter. If you use this setter, it knows, aha, you updated this. So I have to re-render this. Actually, I'm not sure what's gonna re-render. It's internal React stuff, which I'm not aware of how it really works. But the nice thing here is if you use the set from the state, it knows I have to re-render component. If we go back to the app, you will see that if I update it now, it will update it now. See the name you typed here. I will type Hearthstone. It will update the state instantaneously. The component will be updated. Now, if we have to go to the React Developer Tools, it's really nice. If we go to the input view, you can see what the state is here. You can see hooks. And if we type it in, you can see it updating the state. So this is nice because using this plugin for a Chrome developer tool, this extension, you can actually see the state. You can actually do some nice things here. And at this moment, actually, I can actually change a state, which is also nice. If you have to do some debugging, you can actually change the internal state of a component. This is a really nice tool. You have to use it while developing because it will really help you. So let's wrap it up here and create some more handlers. Let's just call this one, I'm not sure how to rename, name symbol is F2. I will call it handle name change. I will also create a state for the year set year, use state, and I'm sure this the syntax will become very obvious soon. For now, it looks a little bit weird with the use state and stuff like that. It's something really Reacty, but just go on with it. I will use number and let's put the default value on 1990. So now we have two states here, one for this field and one for this field. And we can also create a separate handler here, handle year change. And we'll use set year. Do not forget to parse this, because this is a string. We have to parse it to an integer. So this parses whatever is in here and puts it in the set year, which is actually nothing possible than numbers, because we put it here that it's a number, but the user could change something in his Chrome Developer Tools to go around this. So we're just using parse int here. This is not a very secure way of programming. This can still go wrong in multiple ways, but okay, let's just for now ignore this. Let's not put the console here, console log anymore. Does not do anything yet. We do not handle the click yet. Let's just use our application and go back to our beautiful component developer tool. You can see the state is empty here, 1990s. I can, something we forgot for now is actually we also want the value to show whatever is in the state, which is actually something we do like this. Instead of, we just put a value here, and then we use this value that is inside the state. We can just put it there. So every time the state changes, so in the beginning it will be 1990, it will use this value, it will update it with using the set year, and it will update this component accordingly. So we do another value, we'll put a name in here, and now we have a nice component which is 100% correct, I hope. So you can see the state here. If I change it here, if I put default value, you can see that it's entered here by default. I'm gonna take this one away because we want it to be empty. And now we can show the input view. You can see the state. If I update it, see, you can see the state updating. If I press the button, it will not change the state apparently. So I have something wrong. Set year, there's something wrong here, but I do not know what's going on. It should work. We parse the year, set year, uses this year. We forgot to add the change handler. See, I am not very prepared here. I do not have a script for this, so sometimes I just lose my focus and forget something. But now we added the onChange listener here. We used the correct one. Make sure you use the correct one or the name will start to change. We'll go back here, and if you can see it updating right now. You can see the state updating. If I update it here, you can see it updating right there. So it's actually attached to the state now. So every time the state is updated, this will change also. This is because we put the value here, which makes it a control component by this state, or controlled by the state. This looks like some, yeah, you know, some against authority kind of lyrics. Were controlled by the state. This is not really what I mean, but here we go. If this changes, this will change with it. This is actually what we're calling, like I said, the controlled components. This input is now controlled by this state. This is a very interesting concept. So for now, we've only seen property in state to pass information down from the parent component to a child component. But there's actually something missing still. Still missing. It's actually communication from the child component to the parent component, which is also something you want, because you want to pass something upwards again. You just want bidirectional communication, not something going from top to bottom, but also bottom up. And that's actually what we're gonna call the callback handlers. It's actually a way of returning information back to the parent. The parent component here being the app component. So every time something is added in this component, in the input view, we want to communicate back upwards that something was added. So that we added a name and a year. So we have to add a handler here in the parent component, which is we'll call handle add, and we will accept a game using our nice little fat arrow, and I will just print out the game for now. So now we just want to pass this handle add, this function, this callback handler, to the input component. We want to pass it so the input component, this input view, can call the handle add. We will just pass it down. We will do on add. We will call it like that, and we'll handle add. So this is another property we're using, but we're using the property to pass down this callback handler. We of course have to add it again. We do not have the input view properties, so we create a new interface, input view props, and we put this function. So we're putting the on add property, so we're passing down a function, and we're gonna pass down the interface of the function, which is like we accept a game and we return a void. This is actually the function that we described here. This function accepts a game, returns a void. This actually follows this interface. We could make it into an interface, which would be interesting also. Interface, we call it the add callback. And we can do it like this. And we say this input, this interface takes a function which is handle add, and we can also say, okay, this function follows this interface, this implements this interface, and then it will. On add is not in input view because I do not use the props yet. We can use props like this. But how are we going to do this? We're not going to use the props. Remember, like before, here, we're just using destructuring. And we're going to change it. I'm a bit confused here. Yeah, okay, here we will use the on add. And we call it handle add. This is not the thing we used down here, so we will keep it the same name. So now this input view is passed down the callback handler that was created in the parent component. So now we can actually call this function, which we declared in the parent component, from this component. This is getting a bit complicating, but think about something that we're actually passing down a function from the parent component to the child component, so the child component can call this function. So we're gonna use the on add, which is actually now a possibility on the on click that we can do. We can call the on add function here. We're gonna create a new object, name, because currently we're gonna take the state name, the one that we entered. we're gonna do release year, and we're gonna put the sales on 0 because we just created it. And currently it will start complaining that we do not have an ID yet. This component does not know which ID to add. So for now, we're just gonna make it easier for us, and we're gonna make the ID field optional. So now we can call the function with this object with a lot of parameters and not the ID yet. So this function, and I'm aware that this might get a little bit tricky, is passed down from the app component. It's here. We pass it down to the input view. Click the input view like this. So it gets it by the properties. So the input view has this handler, and it will call it whenever the user presses the button. And then it's called here. And this function is actually this function, and we will call the console log. So now our small application is almost finished. So we put some stuff here, Hearthstone. Well, I don't know when it was created. Let's say 2018. If we do go to console, you can see the console log we created here is called. Now we can actually tie up the loose ends. We actually want to put the game here in this array. You would say, maybe I can add it here. But I say games, let's push the game. Easy. Again, if we want to update the list of games, we need to have something that triggers a re-render. This is just a variable right now. Like I said before, you do not use variables to keep data that changes over time, because if this changes, no re-render will be called. So now what we have to do is use a state. We have to put this array in a state. Let's do some refactoring. We create a state. We say set games for the setter. And then use state. We will put a game array in there like before, and then we just put in these items. So now we have a state containing the games, and we have a way of updating them that every time the set games is called, the re-render is called, which is quite nice. We instead of here pushing it into games, because now this is a state, we cannot do that. We cannot change the state directly. We'll always have to use set games. And we're going to do set games. And then actually we're going to use some niceness here. We're going to say with the triple dot notation, which is the rest operator, we can say we put the current array in front. We say every element of the current array we put here, and then add the second. So the array will be updated and a new element will be added. This is the way we do it. You just never push something directly into the state. You just add it. You create a new array containing the old element and append the new element here. The only thing that was not present, and we do not want to ruin this, is that every element has an ID. So we have to look up the ID we want to add, which is quite easy, because actually the newest ID, if we have to add a new element, we just look up the highest element and add 1. So this would be, the new element would be 3. Obviously, we can use the math max function for that. So we just use the max. We say math math.max, and we want to have the max of the IDs. Let's just take the games array and map every element to the ID. So what does this function do? It takes an array of values and it takes the maximum of it. Let's start with 0. So we do max. We take a converted array. We mapped the array from elements to just the IDs, and we take the biggest one and we do it +1. There are other ways of doing this. You can just loop over it with a for loop, anything you want. This is, well, a little bit of niceness using some functional programming, but you can do it whatever you want. It's like, let's say the game, the game, you just lost the game because I referenced the game. So yeah, you lost again. Let's just ignore this, sorry. Let's say game.id is max. So it just, the game, you pass down here. We added an ID, we called it max. Max is actually number 3 if we add it. So we just looked the highest number, we add 1 and set the ID to max. And then we said like set games, we take this part and add the new game, and it's updated. And every time the game array, the game state is updated, the entire app will re-render. Actually, only the element will be added because of the key. If you remember properly, we use the key, so it knows when it's updated that it only has to add something. If it's changed, it knows that only this element must change because of the key. Let's see if it works. This is a really exciting moment. We add the game Hearthstone and 2018. We add it, and you can see it's added here. You can add more elements, and it's actually getting quite interactive here. So we're adding new elements. It's all kind of funky stuff here. The state is updated. It knows that it's changed. I can actually go into my developer tools again. You can see the state here updating again and again every time I add something. Among Us, for example, which is also a fun game. We add it, you can see it being added here. You can see if you go to the input view, you can see that the handle add function was passed down as a property. You can see the current state of the input view, and the list is updated every time you add something. Super Mario, which is like 1990s or something. You can see everything updating nice and smoothly. And this is actually one of the big advantages of React, that it's fairly simple to create applications like this. If you had to do it in vanilla JavaScript, it would have been a lot of more code. Okay, this was the first part of the series. Next time I will be talking a bit more about splitting up components into different files, talking about styling, which is important because this really this sucks at the moment. This is not a pretty website yet. I'm gonna talk a little bit more about side effects, and then if I have some time and maybe we can pass it on to the next session, we will talk about routes and routers and pages and calling web services. And then maybe at the end we will discuss a bit about context. I hope you enjoyed this little talk. This was just a preparation for my class. This is no professional material. I probably said some wrong things here. you can add comments to below here, and well, I will see you next time. I hope this was a little bit interesting. Okay, have a nice day, and I will see you next time.